A couple of days ago, I put out a video where I discussed the difference between trading and investing. Now, I said that basically a trade is when you buy an asset at a particular moment in time and at a particular price, and then you hold it for a bit of time and then you sell it, hopefully at a higher price, and that difference in price is your profit. An investment, I said, is when you buy an asset, but as you hold that asset over time, it produces an income for you. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to invest. Now, as far as I'm concerned, trading is all good and fine, but where you really want to be is in investing. It's really funny because everything I learned about investing, I learned when I was 11 years old, or at least the important bits of it. And I'll tell you how I learned it. You see, when I was 10, 11 years old, I got obsessed with Monopoly. You know, the way a small child will get obsessed with any game. Now, this, of course, happens before a kid discovers girls, right? I was crazy about Monopoly, and I would play my dad just about every night. And the thing is, see, my dad would beat me all the time with unnerving regularity, and it drove me up the wall because I thought I was playing Monopoly, the board game, as it should be played. Because my strategy was very simple. I would try to get the quote-unquote good properties, you know, like the northwest corner of the board, you know, or New York Avenue and Indiana Avenue, those properties, right? Get those properties, and also, of course, Park Place and Boardwalk, because they were like the high-end properties, the expensive ones, the ones where you would make like a lot of money. And I would try to get those properties and sort of like look down on every other property. And as soon as I got 3 properties and I was able to build houses or a hotel, I would buy, you know, 4 houses on each property and then crown it with a hotel, right? And I thought that this strategy was the winning strategy and I should win. And I kept losing. And I kept losing to my dad, and my dad was carrying out such a ridiculous strategy in my eyes. Because what he would do is that, you know, he would roll the dice, and whatever property he'd fall on, he'd buy it the instant he landed on it. He wouldn't try to get like the good properties. He'd just buy whatever he happened to land on. And when he had 3 properties of the same color, of the same grouping, instead of building, you know, 4 houses and then a hotel, he'd just build 3 houses and leave it at that, almost as if he were indifferent to the property. And it just drove me nuts because I would have all of these hotels and all the rest of it, and I'd play my dad, and invariably I'd fall on one of his properties and wind up having to sell the hotels and sell the houses and mortgage the properties, and soon enough I'd go bankrupt. And it just drove me nuts that he kept winning even though I had the correct strategy. One day, I don't quite remember how this happened, but my dad set me to a task. He asked me to take a pad, a spreadsheet pad. Now, this is, of course, before computers, when you had to do all your spreadsheets by hand. And he asked me to do like a very simple study. He asked me to get the percentages of rental income for every single property, for every single combination of properties on the property. That is 1 house, 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses, and a hotel. And so I diligently went about this task of figuring out all the percentages. And retrospectively, I realized what he was asking me to do. He was giving me a very simplified version of internal rates of return. He was trying to show me, by me working out the math myself, which properties were valuable and at what point they became truly valuable. Now, on screen right now, you're looking at a card from a Monopoly game for Boardwalk. Now, Boardwalk and Park Place were pairs, right? And so when you build a house in one of those properties, you have to build it in both houses, right? Okay, so if you buy one house, you have to spend $400, $200 for each house, one on each property. And when you do that, the rental income, what is it? It's $200. That is 200. That is the rental income divided by 400, which is the cost of those 2 houses. So it's basically a return of 50% every time somebody lands on either one of those 2 spots, right? But if you build 2 houses, what's your income? $600. But how much do you have to invest? Well, you have to buy 4 houses, 2 on each property, right? So that's 800. So it's 600 divided by 800. That's 75%. Now here, of course, comes the kicker. What happens when you build 3 houses on each property? 3 houses means that you have to buy 6 houses in total. 6 houses at $200 each, that's $1,200 cost. But your income if somebody falls on it, is $1,600. So you're basically making 133% return on your investment. And that's when I realized, of course, yeah, because a 50% return on investment is great, 75 is better, 133 is much, much better. But then after that, your percentage flattens out. It's not worth it to build a fourth house and then a hotel. 3 houses is enough. And here's the other thing that I suddenly discovered. As I worked out the math, it turned out that a lot of the crappy properties, the ones that I thought were just, the monopoly version of tenement buildings, like Mediterranean Avenue and Baltic Avenue and all those places, right? Well, their return on investment was even better than Boardwalk. It was worthwhile to go for the cheap places and only build 3 houses, because that's how you were maximizing your return on investment. Now, this simple situation taught me 2 things, and they have stood me in good stead. The first lesson is, it doesn't matter how humble an income stream might happen to be. If it is producing an income, it's worth owning. It doesn't matter if it's not sexy or glamorous. And in point of fact, you'll discover as you get older that the sexy investments, the really cool assets, they don't produce much income. Nowhere near like the crappier ones, the ones that are sort of like a little bit not so cool, not so sexy, not so hot. The crappier properties, the crappier assets, the ones that are not so sexy, will often as not produce a better return on investment because of a fallacy of human nature. You see, who sets the price of an asset? People, right? I mean, it's not like some god or some machine determines the price of any asset, of a house, say, or a company or whatever. It's people. Now, if the asset doesn't look sexy to most people, they'll undervalue it. If it looks cool and shiny and new, especially new, they'll overvalue it. They'll think it's more worthwhile than it actually is. In Eastern Europe, for instance, you wind up paying about 2 times to 3 times as much per square meter for a new property than for an old one. Even though in terms of quality, they're more or less the same, and in terms of rental income, they are within 10-15% of each other. Often as not, the shiny new property will go to 2 to 3 times the price of the old property, the not so shiny, the not so new property. You see? Because people just don't like things that aren't shiny and new. Or let me rephrase that. People think that something that is shiny and new is better. It is inherently better, and it's not. It's just all in your head, especially insofar as investments are concerned. Insofar as investments are concerned, if it's shiny and new, who cares? You don't pay attention to that. You pay attention to the return on the investment. And if it's humble, humdrum, not very spectacular, so what? If it's a good income stream, if it's a good return on investment, that's enough. That's the first lesson. And the second lesson is never spend more than you absolutely have to in order to improve your income stream. Okay, let me give you an example. Suppose, for the sake of argument, that there's a house, a nice enough neighborhood, it costs $100,000. Just say. And if you buy this house for $100,000 and you rent it out, you're going to get $1,000 a month. Again, this is hypothetical, and I'm doing it to make the math easy. Now, $1,000 a month over 12 months, which is a year, you get a return on your investment of 12% a year. Great. That is actually very good return. You know, you're a happy camper. Now, let's just say, for the sake of argument, and again, to make the math easier, that if you spend $2,400 on furniture, and fill up this house with furniture, you can rent out the place not for $1,000 a month, but for $1,150. Okay? That is, you plug in $2,400, and instead of getting $1,000, you get $1,150, right? Is this a worthwhile deal? Absolutely. Absolutely. Why? Because, you see, $150 a month translates into $1,800 more per month. In other words, in essentially a year and 3 months, your extra rental income will have paid for the furniture. You will have improved your return on investment. Now looked at it another way, a more strict manner, even though we're being very informal here. You take $1,150, multiply by 12 months, that's $13,800 per year. $13,800 per year divided by $102,400 is roughly 13.5, something like that. 13.5% per year. 13.5% per year is better than 12%, right? Obviously so. It is much better. So it is worthwhile to plug in the $2,400 to furnish the place and rent it out furnished than to rent it out unfurnished, and saving yourself those $2,400 which you will have recovered in a mere 15 months. And after that, it's just extra profit, extra income, extra revenue. You see? Now, let's continue with the same example. Suppose that it costs, say, again, just making numbers up. Suppose it costs $15,000 to build an in-ground pool. $15,000 to build an in-ground pool. But your rent, you can only charge an extra $100 of rent per month. See, you bought the house for $100,000. You plugged in $2,400 for furniture, and that made your rental go up to $1,150. You plug in $15,000, and your rental goes up to $1,250. Is it worth it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because whichever way you look at it, the added expense is not going to improve your return on investment. In point of fact, if you do the math, it'll decrease your return on investment. If you multiply $1,250 per month by 12 and divide that figure by 117,400, you will find that it is in fact less than if you had not built the in-ground pool. You see, yeah, sure, you improved the property because you built an in-ground pool, and you actually increased the rent by 100. Okay, I mean, $1,250 is more than $1,150, right? But just prima facie, you are not making a better deal. On the contrary, you're making a worse deal because your percentage of return on your investment is less. That's the lesson from the Monopoly game. Because me, what I'd been doing before, I'd been building 3 houses and then a 4th house and then the hotel. But I was spending the money and my return was decreasing. It was at 3 houses that the return was maximized. That simple lesson that sometimes improving a property, improving an asset, does not improve its profitability. You have no idea how many really, really sharp customers have fallen into that trap. The same people who fall into the trap of going for the shiny and pretty and new asset instead of the, humdrum, humble, not so sexy asset. Because they look at superficialities, they're not looking at the reality. That percentage, the return on your investment, and the more sophisticated one, the internal return on investment, those are the numbers, the percentages that you have to be looking at. And you have to ignore everything else. Okay? Now, a final note, and perhaps I should have started this post with this final note, but what's the difference between an investor and a trader? Well, I talked to you before that a trader makes money off the difference in price, during which the asset doesn't deliver any revenue, whereas the investor is concerned about the revenue stream of the asset that he owns. Why do you want to have revenue streams? I mean, what's the point of it? Okay. Do you want to accumulate assets? No. An investor does not want to accumulate assets. He wants to accumulate assets that are working for him, that is, producing an income stream. Think of it in these terms. You, yourself, you finished high school, got an education in college, what have you, you're working some job, right? Now, your body and your head and your mind and your education are working for you. Because you go out into the work world and you work and you suck up to the boss and you do whatever he wants and you smile every day and show up to work on time and all the rest of it. And for your pains, you get a paycheck, a revenue stream. So your body and education, your mind, your person is working for you. It goes out to the job, creates a revenue stream for you, and with that revenue stream you do whatever you want, pay for food, lodging, what have you. What you are trying to do as an investor is to have more revenue streams, i.e. more assets, be they people or material things, producing revenue streams for you, right? So that way you don't work. That's your goal as an investor. Your goal is that you don't want to be producing a revenue stream. You want other shit to be producing a revenue stream for you. When you're young, you go to the job, you go to, do whatever is necessary to generate a revenue stream for you. But your goal is to acquire the assets that will produce a revenue stream for you so that you don't have to work. So that the assets that you own work for you, right? You see what I'm trying to drive at? A lot of people, a lot of investors, quote unquote investors, don't understand this. They think that investing means acquiring assets. No, you are not interested in acquiring assets. Okay, there are lots of assets in the world, and most of those assets don't produce an income. They just sit there. Like for instance, which would you prefer? Would you prefer to own $1 million home, or would you prefer to own a block of gold worth roughly $1 million? Which would you prefer? I'll tell you what I would prefer, the house, because I can rent it out. I rent out the house and it's going to be producing a revenue stream. The block of gold, it's just sitting there. It's very pretty. I don't know if you've ever held a block of gold. I have. It's remarkably heavy and dense. It feels oddly radioactive because it's the density of the metal. It's really cool. It's really shiny and pretty, and it's impressive to hold a bar of gold. It is useless because it does nothing for you. If you own that bar of gold, who gives a shit? Yes, you can say that your net value is $1 million because you own this bar of gold. So what? It's not doing anything for you. Whereas $1 million home is being rented out for, I don't know, 5 or 10 grand a month or whatever the price of such a home is. It's being rented out, and with that income, you can do stuff. You can pay for your own living expenses, or you can use that revenue stream to buy additional assets and have those assets pay for themselves. See? Because that's the goal of investing. And this is something that a lot of people who claim to be investors forget all the time. The goal is not to acquire assets. The goal is to acquire assets that create a revenue stream so that you don't have to work. That's the point of it. The point of it is to gather up these assets that you own over the years so that you get to your old age, you get to your 50s and 60s and 70s, and you can just sit on your ass and watch TV and go to Tahiti once a year and have a good time and not have to worry about money, not have to worry about your income stream. Why? Because you have accumulated the assets that are delivering a revenue stream to you to pay for your living expenses, to pay for your week-long skiing trip, to pay for going to Tahiti with the family, right? That's the whole point of investing. Now, I hope that this little conversation has helped you out, okay? You'd be surprised how many people don't quite understand the idea of investing because they think that it's just becoming rich, and that's just stupid. Because being rich, that's easy. You can win the lottery and become rich. The point is to not have to work for anybody. See, that's the point. That's real freedom. Once you have that, once you're able to tell anybody to kiss your ass, that's when you're really free.